You found it. It's The Real News with your host, David Knight.
Joining us now is Charles Ortel. He is a private investigator and writer who's been exposing multinational and nonprofit fraud since 2007. So, of course, you'd be interested in the Clinton Foundation. Checks off all of those boxes right there. Since early 2015, Charles has been investigating state, federal, and foreign filings of the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. So we wanted to talk to him about this Uranium One issue as well. He's a frequent contributor on television news. Going back to 2008, he's been on many TV and radio channels. You can find him, charlesortel.com, also on Twitter, @CharlesOrtel. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Ortel.
Please call me Charles. It's an honor to be on your show.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about, since you've been investigating these people for so long, and we had this very interesting exchange going back and forth with the people who are frustrated in Congress saying there's a lot of evidence of corruption here. You've seen a lot of evidence of corruption here. What do you think about this, first of all, this back and forth, the fact that it's not going to be any special prosecutor?
Well, I listened to much of the Sessions testimony, and you're right, in that clip, that's what he said, but later he corrected himself to say that he's not going to prejudge a decision. Here, I think, going way back to October 23rd, 1997, when this Clinton Foundation operated under the protection of the Clinton crime family while he was president, this thing has been a fraud from the inception. There's never been a valid audit, independent financial audit, which is required of a charity. That is obvious. It should have been obvious to James Comey and Robert Mueller when the Clinton Foundation was investigated from 2001 to 2004, and surprisingly when in late August 2004, the team that had been on top of this and should have been able to see this obvious fraud decided to give it a pass. So it expanded and expanded and expanded. The real deal here is not necessarily just Uranium One. It's that when you have an unregulated presidential foundation with, partisan hack trustees and partisan hack advisors, and no one checks how much money is actually sent towards it, it's a simple way to, establish corruption in the guise of charity. That's the real scandal here. And today is a red-letter day, November 15th, 2017. The Clinton Foundation is either going to compound their fraud by submitting more final tax forms for 2016, or they're going to fess up and beg for mercy. But we will know by midnight tonight what the story is.
Wow, very interesting. Now, you just mentioned the date of 2004, and Mueller and Comey not really doing their job. And, of course, all this Uranium One stuff and everything, that happened, what was that? That was around 2009, 2010 that was percolating through there?
Yeah, and there's a red herring there. The red herring is, the question of when Frank Giustra, the Canadian guy who got involved with Uranium One, when did he give money to the Clintons? When did he exit from Uranium One? That's all a red herring. Frank Giustra's contributions to the Clinton Foundation supposedly started in 2006, around $30 million, supposedly to fight HIV/AIDS, something for which the Clinton Foundation was never authorized. It has never been validly organized anywhere in the world, especially in Canada. They have never validly declared what the Clinton Foundation in New York was doing to control the Canadian and international operations of that joint venture. It is all wrong. They've had multiple leading experts, Simpson Thacher, DLA Piper, Price Waterhouse, all sorts of people have been on the inside. I've never been on the inside. All the people I work with, all the evidence I see is plain as the nose on our faces. This has been a fraud for a long time, and a lot of people have been sending a lot of money towards the Clintons to either escape prosecution or gain the benefit of what the Clintons and their machine and the Obamas could do for them. This is, and now President Obama and his people seem to be emulating this behavior in the crooked Obama Foundation.
That's right. They're going to create a big foundation. He's done everybody up one in terms of his library. I mean, he's spending $500 million on his Chicago library and then creating the Obama Foundation. Because, hey, it worked, didn't it, Charles?
Well, you see, and there, it's very interesting. The presidential libraries and the subject of libraries in 2017, most libraries today have gone digital. Why do you need to spend another $500 million on yet another big building in Chicago? And by the way, presidential libraries have to comply not simply with 501c3 statutes, but with the Presidential Libraries Act of 1955 as amended in 1986, with the Presidential Records Act of 1978. They filed forms when President Obama was president that were approved by the crooked IRS department then to say this was going to be a presidential library. And then after the fact, when they illegally started fundraising, they've changed their tune and say, no, we're not going to hold presidential records. You're not allowed.
Well, that is a red flag right there. We're talking to Charles Ortel. We're going to be right back. We've got to take a quick break. They do have a big slide there, metaphorically a slippery slide. Michelle wanted that so people could snow sled. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Charles Ortel. He is a private investigator who, since 2015, has been investigating the Clinton Foundation. And he has found that he thinks it is perhaps the largest unprosecuted ongoing fraud in history. That's pretty strong words, but that's somebody who's been looking at this for 2 years. So we're going to get back to the facts that Charles Ortel has uncovered about this. Real quickly before we do, I just want to remind you of some of the sales that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. That's what supports this program and everything that we do here at InfoWars. We have extended free shipping and sales from our 34-hour broadcast last week, and we've added a couple of items. We've added Z-Shield, which protects you from toxic metal and chemical pollution in your food and drinks. That is now 50% off plus free shipping. Our probiotic formula, Biome Defense 50, is still on sale, 50% off plus free shipping. Secret 12, our vitamin B12 formula, Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix, both of those 50% off with free shipping. And Caveman, our true paleo formula, is also 50% off with free shipping. Take a look at the specials that we still have at InfoWarsStore.com. Many of them are 50% off plus free shipping. We thank you for your support. Let's go back to Charles Ortel. As I just pointed out, Mr. Ortel, you said that you think this is the largest unprosecuted ongoing fraud in history. It may reach hundreds of billions of dollars. You were just saying in the last segment that back in 2004, Mueller and Comey took a pass on doing any audits. You also mentioned briefly the fact that they were collecting money for HIV, something that they weren't doing anything with. Let's talk a little bit about Haiti as well. That's something they collected a great deal of money on, and we've had a lot of people who were there on the ground who said the Clintons did absolutely nothing there. What do you know about Haiti, for example?
Well, unfortunately, I know a lot about Haiti. So what the Clintons did, they've had a long-standing relationship with certain thuggish elements in Haiti, and they landed on that poor island nation, first, in theory, providing HIV/AIDS drugs to people who may have had that disease in Haiti, beginning sometime around 2003-04 timeframe. As I mentioned, a charity can't wake up one morning and say, we're supposed to build a presidential archive in Little Rock, but today let's fight HIV/AIDS in Haiti. You're not allowed to do that. You've got to go to the IRS first. You got to prove that you've been validly organized and operated at all times, which they were not. You then have to apply for a change in purpose. They never did any of that validly. So they worked around through that. Haiti is, seems to be an island that just cannot catch a break in comparison, or the portion of the island cannot catch a break. And in 2009, in April of 2009, Bill was appointed special UN envoy, I think, to Haiti. And then they created a company, they shouldn't have done it this way, in Florida, called the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation Corporation in Florida, strangely. Then in January, I want to say it was January 12th, I may have the date wrong, but around January 12th, 2010, the horrible earthquake hit Haiti and devastated an island yet again. And instantly, appeals began. Bill Clinton started something illegally called the William J. Clinton Haiti Fund, never registered that properly anywhere in the world. Money started pouring towards the idea of helping Haiti. No one knows yet how much money actually went towards Haiti. Some people say $6 billion, some people say $10 billion, some say $13 billion. That's the, in quotes, magic of charity fraud. It's not what's in the books. It's how much money gets sent towards the problem, and then how much money is stolen from the victims, and then how much money is declared, and then of the money that's declared, how much of that is stolen. So in 2010, you have a special problem. Barack and Michelle Obama contributed money out of the Nobel Peace Prize winnings to the Clinton Bush Haiti Fund, $200,000. That was not validly organized, that foundation. In addition, the main Clinton Foundation somehow sent $37.2 million to a post office box in Baltimore where there's no Clinton Bush Haiti Fund registered, and they got their parent company filings wrong. the Clinton-Bush-Haiti fund filings are wrong. And in November 16th, 2015, they refiled the parent company financial statements and IRS audit. They're all wrong. It's within the statute of limitations. The real question here is not, is this a fraud? The real question is, why did Rod Rosenstein, who was the U.S. attorney in 2015, in Baltimore, why didn't he see this? He's the same guy on Uranium One. He's the same guy on the crooked Ranbaxy generic drug company of India that paid a $500 million fine for selling adulterated drugs, including adulterated HIV drugs that the Clinton Foundation likely distributed. I mean, Mueller, Comey, Rosenstein are in this Clinton Foundation mess every which way from Sunday.
That's right. And that's something that hasn't been widely reported, what you just said, Charles. Most people are saying, hey, look, all three of these guys are involved in this Uranium One thing, but they were involved in so much more even before that. I mean, they've been the three amigos covering up all this stuff for Hillary Clinton for a long, long time. And why isn't this being investigated? It's almost like Jeff Sessions doesn't have any control and is being run by Rod Rosenstein, everything at the DOJ.
Well, I think the Clintons have been very clever. We go back to when he was president and the missing FBI files. We don't really know how much dirt the Clintons managed to get on people, rivals in their party, enemies in the Republican Party, independent. We just don't know yet. And as a guest, they hold this dirt over different people. And this scandal it goes across party lines. They're establishment Republicans, they're Obama and Clinton Democrats, and they hold loaded guns at one another. Nobody wants to see the shooting. What will happen? How many bodies will get buried here? But the fact is, across America, whether you're a conservative or progressive or an agnostic on politics, nobody is in favor of charity fraud. Nobody is in favor of that. And this is the largest charity fraud ever attempted. It's Robin Hood in reverse. Shame on the Clinton people.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Profiting off of the misery of other people, showing the suffering, grabbing billions of dollars and doing nothing with it, and doing it over and over and over again. And yet what we see is that the FBI says, oh, well, sorry, we're not going to give you the servers. Crowdsource tells the FBI, we're not going to give any of that to you. We're not going to let you see that. And they say, oh, okay. They sheepishly go away. Look at the difference in the way they treated Hillary Clinton, the DNC, the Clinton Foundation, the deference that they showed them versus what they do with Paul Manafort. If they really have a real investigation, they do a crack of dawn raid and they take what they want, but not with the Clintons. They have these connections. They just tell them, go away. There's nothing that you're interested in here. And they do.
Exactly. And, the thing is, I don't know anybody really in the FBI, but I imagine that the line people in the FBI, not the managers, not the people who could be politically corrupted, the line agents in the FBI must be furious. They know this is a fraud. And it's going on as we speak on this broadcast. I mean, it's got to be shut down. We got to have some real attention on the forms that are going to be filed by midnight tonight, not simply the federal forms, the state forms, the international forms. Shame on the regulators. Shame on the attorneys general for not going after this. Shame on Eric Schneiderman here in New York, who went after Trump on the Trump Foundation for a much smaller set of issues, which did get resolved, while he lets the Clinton Global Initiative University, which is a non-existent organization, go around and pretend that it's a real university and ignore the fact that Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton took $17.6 million from the for-profit joint venture partner in Clinton Global Initiative University without declaring it on their foundation forms. Ridiculous.
Wow. And, of course, as you mentioned in the last segment, what we're seeing now with the Obama Library and the Obama Foundation, they're taking this template that has been done by the Clintons, and they're applying it, and they're going to scale it up, I believe. It's going to be much larger. I mean, you just look at the amount of money that they budgeted for their library, and I think their Obama Foundation is going to be even larger than the Clinton Foundation.
Well, let's hope not.
Yeah. If you allow this corruption to go on, what you're going to wind up with is something that is increasingly corrupt, and so we'll have to see what happens with these reports that come out tonight. Stay with us, one more segment, and we'll talk about exactly what these reports are that are supposed to be filed by midnight tonight and what could and should be done about this. We're talking to Charles Ortel, charlesortel.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Charles Ortel. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Charles Ortel. He has been studying the Clinton Foundation for 2 years or more. And he has the information. As you just heard, all the facts that he was putting there. If you want to get this information for free, go to charlesortel.com. He's laid this stuff out there. And folks, if maybe what we should do is go there, educate yourself, and then start tweeting this out to your friends and to Jeff Sessions, maybe to Jim Jordan, who will actually maybe do something about this. Get this information widely distributed. Give Mr. Ortel the credit for it. But Charles, we were talking in the last segment, and you mentioned the fact that all the things that Rod Rosenstein has been involved in, many of us are concerned about this, just as we look at that one event around Uranium One and say, these are the guys who have been appointed. Why would he choose Mueller? Why would he, put these same three guys, Rod Rosenstein, James Comey, Bob Mueller, they're always at the center of this. And a lot of us are very concerned that not only is there obstruction of justice going on, but maybe destruction of evidence that's happening here, because it's always these same guys. And we have these reports that are coming out. So we heard from Nigel Farage earlier. He said, I've got a list here of all these people who accepted money from George Soros. He's just donated $18 billion to the Open Society Foundation. They're not interested in that. They're not interested in that kind of meddling in our election. But, of course, we're talking about a lot more money from Hillary Clinton. What they're concerned about instead is Facebook and $100,000 worth of ads on Facebook. But if George Soros contributes $18 billion, 18,000 times that's not concerning. And if Hillary Clinton has got this corrupt network that maybe, as you point out, looking at based on your research, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars, they don't want to do an investigation with that. Let's talk a little bit about the Ukraine, Charles.
Sure. So the Clinton Foundation got involved in the Ukraine around 2004, in theory, fighting HIV/AIDS. Now, I've had the pleasure of visiting the Ukraine more than 10 times, and it's actually an interesting place, but it's hopelessly corrupt. And at the time they got involved, in theory, fighting HIV/AIDS, the foundation wasn't authorized for that, yet they started getting these large donations. In fact, during 2004, George Soros Foundation gave $1 million for this effort. And later, after the initial small money came in, they started getting hundreds of millions of dollars to fight HIV/AIDS, which has never been accounted for. Ukraine is well known as a place where there is, as I mentioned, corruption, heavy involvement of the political families there in corrupt activities. It's a great in quotes, a great transshipment point for contraband inside and outside of Western Europe, because it's easy to get from Ukraine, just to drive into Western Europe. Mm-hmm. And they're in bed with something called the Victor Pinchuk Foundation, which I don't see it being registered properly inside the United States if they have any activities here, though they did seem to participate with Clinton activities here. And Victor Pinchuk is a person who, when you look closely at him and his wife, very much tied into suspect activities in Iran, and other suspect activities around the world. And there's just person after person. I joke that there's something like Ortel's first law. You take anybody connected to the Clintons, put their name into Google, and then put the word fraud next to it and see what you find out. And it works every time. Try it with Victor Pinchuk.
Not even 6 degrees of separation, just one.
Right.
Just one. And they have this MO. It appears, as you're talking about this, every time they go into an area, whether it's Haiti or whether it's Ukraine, we're going there to fight HIV. And they start fundraising on that, and then that's the beginning of it. And then they start creating new unregistered, not officially created organizations. They don't go through all the legal paperwork. They never get audited for any of their charities. And they don't fill out the paperwork. I mean, this seems to be the MO everywhere. They're going everywhere around the world doing this.
Yeah, and the rules on the books are actually pretty well thought through in the United States. They depend on ancient precedents going all the way back to Roman times. A U.S. charity operating internationally must be tightly controlled from a U.S. base. It may not engage in any illegal activities anywhere. And the act of filing tax forms using the mail and soliciting, using telephones, the postage, whatever, these are serious crimes. Corinne Brown in Florida, a former congressperson, is due to be sentenced on the 4th of December for a much smaller charity fraud. She's been convicted on 18 counts of fraud and related offenses. And originally, she might have gone away for hundreds of years. She's 7 years old. She's a black congressperson, $800,000 slush fund. This is the declared amount, $2 billion. As I mentioned, I think when you consider all its tentacles, it's more like hundreds of billions, maybe even more than that, around the world. And the Clintons get a pass. Why is that fair?
Yeah, and it's very interesting too. When we look at this, when you look at what happened, for example, with the emails and the careless, illegal handling of emails that were above top secret, and then the way they hammer people, like the guy who was on the submarine for something that was born classified to the level of confidential, which is the lowest level. When we look at these investigations and we look at what Bob Mueller was doing and expanding the scope of investigations to start to get into financial dealings of the Trump businesses and so forth, as I pointed out before, the financial crimes are very, very easy to prosecute because they're so detailed. There's so much paperwork, and it is something that's very easy to get somebody on with financial, with crimes, with transgressions, with income tax, because the income tax laws and the financial crime laws are so complex that you can basically, come in and say, well, this is the way we interpret it, and we think that you did it the other way. That's why they have the lawyers who are always arguing over tax law. But when we look at something like the Clintons, nobody ever even bothers to look at their stuff. And the just completely ignoring the entire legal process is what we're looking at here, and the fact that they never get audited. Getting a pass over the most serious crimes, like violating national security that everybody else gets hung on, and these other tripwires like financial crimes, income tax type of crimes, and they escape all of these tripwires that get everybody else.
Well, it's surprising until you consider that the top person in the IRS who would have been overlooking this, literally overlooking it for many years, was Lois Lerner.
Yes.
Yes. Charity fraud.
That's right.
Charity fraud, you do not need to prove intent. All you need to prove is that people were soliciting, which the Clintons boast about, and then just that the forms that are in the public domain, the federal, state, foreign tax forms, are false and materially misleading. That's all you have to prove. And the penalties here apply not just to the Clintons, not just to the trustees, the accounting firms, but to the donors. If a donor like the Gates Foundation contributes to a public charity that is not actually a public charity, the IRS has the right to go in and assess massive fines, even to shut down the Gates Foundation and the other big donors that are private foundations, and to take their assets, to seize their assets.
Boy, that's a very important point. That's why it was so important when the tax-deferred status and everything was being held up by Lois Lerner for conservative organizations. As you point out, anybody that donated money to them, they would be the target of a crime as well. So withholding that declaration, keeping that out there as something they could go after the donors while looking the other way for everything that the Clintons are doing and never auditing them, that goes back to the IRS. It goes back to Lois Lerner. And it even goes back to Koskinen, who stayed in as a holdover from the Obama administration. He's just been replaced, not because he was fired by Trump, but just because they did not renew his appointment. They let it expire. They're afraid of these people, aren't they?
Exactly. And, we're sitting here trying to get tax reform done. We have to use static scoring, not dynamic scoring. That's going to show it's a tight, it's going to be tough. But if you added in a one-line gain from going after there's $5 trillion in American charities. Some percentage of those are crooked. If you added in the one-time gain that you might get in 18, 19, and 20 from assiduously going back over the biggest charities, the big universities. I went to Yale and to Harvard. You look at them. Why were they supporting the Clinton Foundation? Why was Columbia supporting it? Why were the Rockefeller people supporting it? And many others. You look at the big ones first. They're not supposed to be machines to make the donors to these institutions richer than they already are. They're not supposed to create private gain. They're not supposed to engage in illegal activity. Yet the Clinton Foundation is wholly engaging in illegal activity and funded by many of the smartest people in the world, richest foundations around the world, also by governments, by foreign governments.
Boy, that's an important point, Charles. As we're looking at this tax reform, and of course, everybody, Washington Post discovered it last week. Congressional Budget Office said, hey, we've scored this, and it'll increase over a decade the cumulative debt by $1.5 trillion. Well, we increased over the 8 years of Obama. We went from a $10 trillion debt to a $20 trillion debt. So why would they be concerned about that? But as you point out, if they could recapture the money that was fraudulently put into these charity organizations, that would go a huge way towards recovering the deficit that we have that's going to add to the debt on an annual basis. That's very important. Charles Ortel has very important research that you can find at charlesortel.com. as you just heard, all the detail of the research that he's been doing over a couple of years. You can find that at charlesortel.com. You can also find him on Twitter at Charles Ortel. Thank you for joining us, Charles. It was a very fascinating interview. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States. Whenever you want to have a debate with a fake liberal, they always resort to violence.
We need to wake people up.
What the aging process is when the cell replicates, we lose a little bit of our telomeres. Telomeres are the little cups on the end of our chromosomes.
And when it runs out, you start dying. Secure your DNA force today at InfoWarsLife.com.